which one was that one? Yeah. We are light on the ground. Cool. Was that the response to me starting the meeting? I think Ian thought I was just sitting here for a laugh. Yes, that's it. He's on his way, mate. Yeah, okay. Welcome, everyone. We are a little bit light today. Doesn't mean that the debate or the scrutiny will not be as professional and rigorous as normal. So first of all, apologies, please, James.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, we have had apologies for non-attendance from the Chair, Councillor Mercer, representing East Northamptonshire Council. She is actually self-isolating, having come into contact with someone who's come into contact with someone, reflecting the current COVID-19 situation. Also apologies for non-attendance from Councillor Griffiths from the Borough Council of Wellingborough, Councillor Kane, Corby Borough Council, Councillor King, Northampton Borough Council, and Councillor Strachan, Northamptonshire County Council, and final apologies for non-attendance from Susan Zeiss, the Northamptonshire County Council Monitoring Officer, and Sophia Narty, the Deputy Monitoring Officer. Sorry, and also Kerry Pennell, the Assistant Director, Customers and Communities from Northamptonshire County Council.
Thank you. Do we need legal for these meetings, monitoring officer? Or...
No.
We don't? Okay. Sorry.
I act as the representative of the Chief Executive and Monitoring Officer.
And good deputy at that. Are there any requests from members of the public?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Declaration of members' interest. Members are reminded that where they have an interest in any business to be considered at this meeting, they must declare it in accordance with their respective code of conduct. Chair announcements. Well, this is the last meeting before the, well, we think before the general election, the local elections and the Commissioners' elections, so maybe I should hold back on that. But I take it is the last meeting of our co-opted members for this term, unless you reapply, which hopefully you will do. So thank you for the past year to both of you. We really appreciate that. Appreciate your wisdom and your input, and sincerely hope that you both will consider staying on for another year. And
well, 4 years is the normal term, Chair.
Oh, is it?
I'm sure the point still stands.
Okay, yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, stay on for 4 years, however long. But thank you for what you do. We appreciate that. And also, we have a couple of new faces. I see a Lucy and a Kelly. So I'm sure you will be introduced, but why not do that formally now? So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Lucy Spencer. Lucy Spencer, I am one of the Early Intervention ACE support officers for the OPFCC, and we're here today to tell you a little bit about what we do and some of the cases, the families that we've worked with in the past 18 months now. Fantastic.
And we certainly understand the importance of that work in obviously preventing crime, preventive recidivism in young people and all the rest of it. So vital work, and we look forward to hearing your briefing later on. Sorry?
There's 2 new faces.
2 new faces? Sorry?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, there's a second new face.
So I'm Kelly Crockett. I'm also an Early Intervention ACE support officer with the OPFCC. I work over in Daventry in South Northants, and I'll explain a little bit more when we get our chance to explain what we do in our role.
Yeah, I took it that Lucy was speaking on behalf of you both. Yeah. I thought, oh, well, that'll save me going to Kelly, and then I get rebuked. You know, I've only done the job for 2 minutes. I'm already in trouble. All right, okay. Minutes. Everyone happy with the minutes?
Just one.
Okay, so.
On page, bear with me. So page 10, if we go down to the second set of bullet points, the first bullet point there, the projected shortfalls over the MTFP period were relative when considered. I think, not looking to put words into the Commissioner's mouth, but relatively minor, relatively insignificant. That was the flavour of it, wasn't it?
They were relatively minor in the context of the totality. What do anyone... I wouldn't want anyone to think the amount of money we think is not, but as a percentage of the total monetary budget we're administering, they were quite minor. I think was the point was made last time.
Okay, we captured that. Yeah, thank you. And apart from that, you happy for them to be signed as accurate? Do we sign them?
Yes, you do.
Thank you.
Just do that to me.
Thank you. Your date?
13th of the 3rd.
Friday as well. Please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, straight into business then. Item 6, Police Fire and Crime Commissioner update. Over to you, sir.
If I may ask your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I have two pieces of information I wish to share with you. One, some sad news, and then one I promised to at our meeting to give a update around COVID-19. The first one, it's with great sadness that I inform the panel we lost a dear friend and valued colleague, Sergeant Paul Keeney. He tragically passed away on Wednesday evening on duty. He was just 44. He transferred from Hertfordshire in 2008. His latest role was custody sergeant at our Weekly Woods Custody Centre in the north. He was extremely popular and will be sadly missed by all who knew him. I'm sure you'll join me in sending your thoughts and condolences to his family at this devastating time. Welfare support is in place for both his family and also his friends and colleagues who are grieving for him at this time.
Commissioner, do you mind, was that as a result of illness or
well, obviously we don't know exactly yet, but it looks most likely as a consequence of illness.
Okay, thank you, sir.
The second one was when we met earlier in this week, and given all of the thing out today, all of this around COVID, I thought it would be good to assure the panel on Northamptonshire Police and Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue on their preparation. So if you like, got a quick brief for you. Obviously, COBRA meeting has now moved to delay phase in response to it. The number of cases in the UK has now risen to 590, with 10 recorded related to the virus. Both police and fire chiefs have put in place command structures across their respective organisations. These structures are also linked in with other services via the county, such as the local resilience forum, which is meeting to ensure effective contingencies are in place. Both organisations have a business continuity plans that are being tested. If the worst case plan scenarios manifest themselves, up to 20% of the workforce are sick, there will be a service delivery impact. The business continuity plans account for this in terms of concentrating on the delivery of key and critical services. So, for instance, responding to emergency calls, provision of custody facilities, and also from a fire and rescue perspective. Operationally, police and fire remained largely unaffected by abstinence or spikes in demand at this time. No confirmed cases, diagnosis of COVID-19 is in the force or the fire and rescue, again at this time. Both services are monitoring on a daily basis changes to government and public health England advice and is factored into thinking and planning. Both organisations are keeping under continual review activities that might be curtailed as Her Majesty and government change. An example of this is fire visits to vulnerable people, something we'll be deciding on this week. Cleaning regimes have been amended in both organisations to ensure that cleaning of work surfaces, in other words, we'll have dirty carpets but clean desks, where potential transmission of virus might take place. Preparations for increased self-isolation and working for a home are underway in both organisations. PHE advice is followed internally and messaging staff, as well as the additional provision of cleaning materials, allowing staff to self-clean work services, and also utilisation of sanitisation and washing. I think I just want to reassure the panel that the appropriate and importantly proportionate measures are in place to monitor developing events and respond to them, to follow Her Majesty's and Government's and Public Health England advice and ensure service delivery to the public is maintained as best as possible, with no current degradation in service. Obviously this matter will continue to be kept under review.
Thank you. Sorry, Commissioner, can we just, any questions for the Commissioner over his briefing? Okay, we appreciate the update. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, today's report provides an update on the work being undertaken by my office in relation to the delivery of the Police and Crime Plan. Important developments such as the creation of a new post to lead on the sharing of support services in both police and fire. As panel members will recall, further information was requested in relation to knife crimes and sexual offences against children. I've included a breakdown by the age of perpetrator of the 631 offences recorded by Northamptonshire Police in the last 12 months where knife crime was used during the offence. It's important to note, however, that a number of the offenders did not equal to the 631 offences. This is due to not all offenders for all occurrences having been recorded, and there could be multiple offenders linked to one occurrence. The panel also requested clarification as to why no information was included in my update report in relation to Northamptonshire Police's performance on sexual offences against children in comparison with its peers. The force does not have comparative data for sexual offences against children. It's only available for all victims, regardless of age. Mr. Chairman, as you'll see from a detailed appendix to this report, Northamptonshire Police are broadly in line with the performance of most of its similar peers. Over the past calendar year, it is the fourth lowest within its most similar forces of all crimes per 1,000 residents, with a rate of 69.7 crimes per 1,000 compared to an average of 71.8 crimes per 1,000. Where there are variations, this is primarily due to proactive action by the force in areas such as knife crime, drug trafficking, and particularly highlight drug trafficking, as you'll note, the big spike based on some of the closing of county lines at the back end of last year. Gun crime is also having a positive impact on local communities, sending out a clear message so that Northamptonshire is a hostile place for criminals. I'm going to talk very briefly about ACEs and go into their presentations. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to take questions on this and then do that after?
I think that's a good idea, Commissioner. Questions with regard to the Commissioner's update. Ken.
With regards to the sexual offences against children, why do you think it's appropriate not to record those?
We record it, but the actual question was around the comparators. So in other words, the comparator information is where it comes from the Home Office, and so actually you kind of compare between them. If you wanted a little bit more kind of detail, and yeah, it looks an astronomical number, but I think one of the things you probably need to appreciate, so for instance, 50% of all of these 50% of all new registrants on the sexual offenders register are a consequence of the viewing of sexual images of children. So a large proportion of what we're talking about here is actually online crime. The one that's also quite troubling actually is around sexting. So actually 20 to 30 of those crimes a month, which is 30% of all our sexual offences, are as a consequence of children under the age of 18 sharing images of themselves. So the bit I want to kind of reassure, there is not a load of sexual predators walking around Northamptonshire preying on our young children. Very large proportion, like I said, 70 offences a month are for online, and when you think about it, that's 900 of the thing. If I add in the 20 to 30, that is also children sending, images of their own genitalia to one another, gives you some idea of in terms of the magnitude. But we don't have that as a comparator, but obviously we know what it is in terms of our own. So apologies if my language probably wasn't clear on that.
Thank you. Anita.
Commissioner, you have two items on this what we call the crime, drug trafficking and modern slavery. Now, both of them have a year on change, plus 13 points. Why, and the other one, modern slavery, plus 12.5 points. Can you expand as to why those two obviously are linked together? because the drug would be fueled by the revenue generated by modern slavery and trafficking. What have you got to say about this statistic?
Thank you. Just to remind you that they're not my crime numbers. They are the forces. Just a slight in terms of languages. Ironically, you might find it odd. I'm actually pleased with the growth in both of these numbers because they're both as a consequence of proactiveness. So, for instance, the drug trafficking, as I think I previously mentioned to the last panel. Broadly in the middle of last year, we had something like 31 county lines groups based in Northamptonshire. 21 lines were closed in the last 6 months of last year. Over 150 people were arrested. It's that big proactive spike that has meant that you've got that kind of big tick. So it's actually, and what happens now from this will be quite interesting, but that was a roll-up of an awful lot of lines. And that was a lot of detailed work that wasn't just done here in Northamptonshire, it was done also in conjunction with the Metropolitan Police. So it wasn't just a case of we rounded up our, if you like, our local drug dealers. It was actually that we took out, if you like, the clumsy language on my part, but kind of the kingpin, the head of the snake in some of our major urban areas. And I know it's anecdotal, but actually there was even an example that one of the users in the county had actually gone and said, I've got to come now and go on to a methadone and to get clean because I actually can't get any drugs at this moment in time. That will only be temporary. It's a vacuum that the whole one about the sink and the plug and the filling up continues to be the case. But in this instance, very proactive. Some of the commitments I made around last year's funding settlement was I would see proactivity in terms of burglary, proactivity in low-level drug dealing. And I think the force has done a very good job in both of those areas. On the modern slavery, it's quite an interesting one for me because I do remember when I added it to my police and crime plan that someone was kind of go, why would you add that? That doesn't happen in kind of our modern society, does it? But actually, I'm afraid it does. You know, our modern slavery and human trafficking as an updated plan, and actually, you know, you look at some of it. Our big number is because of the work we've done. You know, Paul Fellow's not here, and his team have done a lot of briefing to hundreds of people to make them aware of it. And if you put as a comparator, you know, we are trafficked. You know, there was a particular case, without giving too much away, in the north of the county, and they were like, hang on a minute, they brought us from another country. Yes, we can't go anywhere, but they feed us. They don't give us much money, but they feed us. And actually, whilst we might judge them to be squalid conditions they were living in, compared to where they'd come from, they didn't want to go back. So actually, in terms of some of these, in terms of repatriation, and I think there is I probably haven't got the exact number in it, because I'd asked myself in the same question. There might be not as much success in terms of prosecution, because you might have got in terms of cooperation, but actually there had been positive outcomes. But this isn't as simple as we've talked about sometimes in terms of, it's kind of akin to some of the psychological issues that you've seen in some of the domestic violent incidents. You know, they don't see themselves as victims.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Nita.
But I would also just say, at this moment in time, the force's outcome rate is not where I or the Chief Constable will want it to be. So I don't want anyone to take it as fair that I'm satisfied with our judicial outcome. And there are some important investments that have been made in that area, not least in terms of the Forces Change programme, but in addition to that, our digital evidence management to enable us to bring together more clearly, probably on our, what I would call our second tier crimes. So of course, if you've got a major incident, rape, murder, you've got very, you know, you'll know this more than most, very specialist teams and a lot of resources are kind of put onto that. But sometimes the bringing together of small pieces of information will get picked up in a major incident like that. It's not as easy when you're talking about what I would call some of those second tier investigations. So the force is implementing all digital evidence management, what brings together body-worn video camera, CCTV, all the kind of intelligence in a searchable form that makes it much easier for us to bring those evidence together in a way when it's not a major crime. So one of the key focuses for that is to do that. And that, of course, links with some of the work we're trying to do with local criminal justice to make sure that, then there's timely response to court. It's not just a policing response, but actually to make sure that the quality of the case files. So Northamptonshire Police had in previous years had shared some of its kind of criminal justice responsibilities with other forces in those collaborations. I think you've probably heard me say on other occasions that Northamptonshire Police hasn't always got a fair deal on some of those collaborations. So I don't want anyone to think we don't want to collaborate, because actually I think nationally we do need to continue to collaborate where appropriate, but it needs to meet that test. Does it serve the public that it's supposed to in their local area? So as part of that, there is it. But I just want to record, not happy with where we are, but I want to assure you there's some work, quite a lot of work done in that area.
Thank you. Anita.
Yes, Commissioner, I saw an article on the news regarding the problem that you were highlighted with sunflower, i.e. the numbers of cases has increased tremendously, and you stated that you only had currently at the moment 4 qualified members, and you were looking for your partners to contribute a little bit more, obviously, to recruit more qualified staff. Now, I have been to Sunflower, and I saw what the officers were dealing with at the time. Now, if I remember, you said that there was an increase of 80% on cases. Could you tell me if you have been successful in recruitment, and does your partner, like Corby Council and other county council, will contribute a larger portion, because you have contributed over 130,000, something like that, and the partners 24,000 and 13 respectively? Thank you.
I'm going to answer that in the broad principle, then I'm going to hand over to my colleague who's handling it directly, because you've got some percentages there that I don't want to get wrong. I think the first thing I would kind of want to say is we restructured and worked with Sunflower and have been doing so over the last 2 or 3 years to really try and make sure that it's on a firm financial footing. There's no statutory obligation to any one agency to make sure that that provision is provided. So actually, if you like, it's a partner delivered. Within the past, a lot of those people employed by Northamptonshire Police. What we did is we wanted to provide it a permanent base, so it was moved to, in conjunction with our Voice, our victims team, and co-located so we could reduce the cost of any hosting, if you like, to reduce the burden, and also have looked how we can leverage our resources to kind of make sure that we can provide more support, potentially with terms of better value. So the report that was kind of put together was, to be fair, an internal one, and in some respects I'm saddened that it was kind of shared. But I suppose if the positive outcome that more people put their hand in their pockets to help us all deal with domestic violence, that would kind of be very helpful. I'm going to add Nikki to probably give us some more information on the exact numbers, and both knows better than me on the current state of who's giving what.
Okay, first of all, I would just like to reassure people and clear up any ambiguity around some of the information that was reported in the press about there being 12-week waiting times for support from Sunflower, which actually isn't the case. The 12 weeks that was referred to in that report actually relates to the lead time for cases to come to MARAC, which is actually only a coordinating function for domestic abuse cases. It isn't it doesn't put the support in place, it just checks that the relevant support has been put in place. So it's not that victims are not getting support for 12 weeks, they are. The other issue in relation to Sunflower is, having done a review of the caseload and the referral numbers, it did become very apparent that actually the service has not received any increase on investment at all for at least 5 years. Everybody's partner agency contributions have been completely flat. So obviously, along with that, with the cost of salaries and on-costs and everything going up, there have been consequential reductions in the number of staff. So as part of a means of trying to remedy that, a paper was drawn up to give partners a number of options to increase the funding. One was to do nothing, one was to increase the funding to allow for the recruitment of 2 additional staff, and one was to increase the funding to allow for the recruitment of 4 additional staff. So far, the majority of partners have come back to confirm their agreement to option 2 for 2 additional members of staff. And we have the funding commitments in place for that for next year. The only exception to that, unfortunately, is the CCG, because they have serious financial issues. However, we have quite positively, between the OPCC and the other funding partners, come up with a means between us, and again it's been very much a collective approach of plugging that gap so that we don't have a shortfall and we can recruit 2 full-time members of staff rather than having to reduce it. So actually it is a shame in which the way in which it was reported in the press. It's actually a very positive story. It really does show that all of the partners have made a commitment in principle to fund for now, and the commitment around funding for the future is very much built into the work streams around local government reform to ensure that that's picked up both from a housing perspective but also from a community safety perspective in future.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think I just would like to take the opportunity, because someone in the press, is to actually thank those for putting their hands in their pocket and joining us with it to secure the future for Sunflower, because they provided a very valuable service for a number of years, and actually it's been quite hard of them, this ongoing kind of funding format. I hope that as we move forward now, both with in this partnership and the new reorganisation of local government foreman, it can be put on a more safer footing and enable the service to continue to kind of grow and do what it's there for, to provide support.
Thank you, Nita. Thank you, Commissioner. Rob.
Question around the knife crime figures. Could you explain for me the knife crime used in offences, what that means, in particular differentiating between physically used as in stabbing someone or threatened for use?
To be honest, it's exactly that. So in other words, sometimes we've got cases, in a simplistic sense, the overall numbers of incidents where someone's reporting at A&E is steady and declining. But there could be an instance, I'm not going to stand up and demonstrate it, but if I stood up and I kind of pretend I've got a knife in my pocket, that would be one where it's not actually used, but it's kind of threatened. So that's the kind of distinction between someone, to be blunt, being stabbed, and also someone in terms of being threatened with it. And it is also worth bearing in mind that in these as well, this contains, these are not all people walking the streets with knives. This is also, as a consequence, a knife being present, for instance, in a domestic violent incident at someone's household as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but
I believe so, if I've got that right. This 643 is people actually being stabbed, yes. With regards to the related incidents, to what degree do we understand, do the police understand the related incidents? For example, that could be presumably stabbed in the context of a robbery, in the context of a violence. What sort of understanding do we have, and is there any key themes behind that?
No, there is a national kind of increase. I think some of the things that you probably want to know from me is what are we actually doing about it, to make sure in terms of kind of educational. So actually, we've invested some money in terms of knife arches, wands, at places to kind of make sure we make it a hostile environment for people that kind of carrying it. The County School Challenge last year focused on knife crime. with the winning school creating a wrap to warn children around its kind of dangers, encouraging referrals to the Early Intervention Hub and SERVE programme to support at risk of young children, and that's particularly relevant around some of the exclusions. A good example of that was that there's a school in the county with a young lad who was excluded. The next day he's on Instagram or one of the social, and there are other social networks available, on social media with a picture of himself of a knife, and that's important. Also making sure we're conducting appropriate stops and search in the high crime areas, which also might overlap with particular kind of knife crimes in town centres as well. I don't want anyone to think it kind of takes it in terms of complacent. It continues to be still a relatively small, was 1% of total crime in Northamptonshire, but it's still an important one. And ironically, you were some of the stuff I gave you earlier. We formed the Youth Commission last year, and one of the things that they looked at is around gangs and in terms of knife crime. So actually, they launched this report earlier on this week. Thank you, Mrs. Shields, for your kind attendance. But actually, it provided us with some insight from their perspective. You look at some of those numbers, around 43% of young people who answered the question said they knew someone who had carried a knife or other weapon. There's some useful information here from the voice of young people that we can take away from this to make sure that we're communicating directly with them. There's some of the things that they'd kind of put in here, I'm like, God, you kind of think, oh, I'd like to have written it in a slightly different way, but actually that's their voice and that's what they're telling us, and it's incumbent on me, the force, and the service to make sure that we go away and do something with that information.
Just to follow up on that further on, the breakdown of the offenders' age I found quite interesting, as in, yes, there's a lot of young people, but actually there's a lot of people in their from late 20s up to 40 using knives. Do we understand the context in which they are using knives?
I haven't got, like I said, there's a good chunk of these that are as a consequence of domestic violence. So actually it might be present in the household, doesn't necessarily mean that, and they might have been threatened with it, but it actually might be, it's not just about them kind of on the street. But it's interesting, I remember while I looked at it, there's this perception that all young kids are walking around the street carrying knives, and that's what you can clearly see is not the case. It's actually much broader than that. It might, like I said, the reasons people carry knives varies across different. There isn't a particular pattern. Obviously, we focus a lot of our effort in, if you like, the young people, particularly on the edge of drugs in terms of carrying it. And I'm sure the ACE team might even comment on some of their experiences there, as I can see you kind of nodding there. But actually, it's more complicated than just young kids feeling unsafe and carrying them around.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for those series of questions. Ian. Sorry, Ken. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
Both of them are very good looking, so obviously.
Oh, that's very nice. My colleague actually stolen some of my thunder, but at the same token, do you have any influence over the CPS to ensure that any offences with regards to carrying knife crime or are in fact dealt with in the appropriate manner?
The independence of our judiciary is an important cornerstone of our democracy, but I think there is some kind of government pressure, because actually one of the ones that's also been trained. Would I personally like to see a more robust response on knife crime from the judiciary? Yes, but they're there to make that determination. Would I also like to see them take a more robust response when police officers and emergency service workers are assaulted? Yes, I would. But having that opinion isn't going to perhaps change theirs, merely, but if you like, shout it from the rooftops, if you like, in what they could or couldn't do. Does that make? I hope I've been sufficiently diplomatic there.
It's probably one of the things when I was involved with the criminal justice system some years ago, is that anybody that was carrying a knife automatically had a 6-month prison sentence, and that worked incredibly well. But in hindsight, and I don't know why, but the criminal justice system decided that wasn't the way to go. The next question I have actually is, when actually somebody goes into A&E in hospital with a knife wound, is that reported to the police?
On that last point, absolutely yes, it is. And actually, that will be the, met with the Minister recently, that's the real measure of success, is that number needs to go down. Injuries from instrument needs to be going down. Doesn't mean we want loads of people walking around with knives that aren't using them, but that's kind of the real measure, is are people getting kind of injured as a consequence of it.
Okay, Anita, one more, and then I think we're going to draw this to a close, because we've had, yeah, okay, Rob, don't give me that charming smile, you know, always wins.
I was going to add to this. You said that the measure for the knife crime is based on the recorded A&E knife crime. What about...
Sorry, I said that the future success of whether our strategies are working nationally will be determined by it. That's not in these measures here.
Oh, I was going to say, what about the knife crime that is not being reported, I mean, for instance, in A&E? Where would they be recorded?
There is good cooperation between A&Es and policing to make sure that they notify policing of when a stabbing has occurred. And that would be the measure of whether the policies in terms of stuff doing. Like I said, you know, I mean, we from our community fund, in the end, at its core, we can't enforce our way out of knife crime. This isn't as much an educational piece. Some of you may or may not know, I provided a grant from our proceeds of crime to actually see, you'll be see the knife angel coming to Northamptonshire. It's June, actually, I think it is. In June, working with partners to get that brought here as part of that kind of educational. In addition to that, there's things in terms of Knife Angel, PCSOs going into schools, because actually really making sure we also communicate to kids. The most likely outcome for someone carrying a knife is that will be used on them. That is the most likely outcome. And actually making sure that we kind of get that across. Can't enforce our way out of it, but we've got education and key part of it, which will lead me, after your question, into the nice piece of...
Thank you, Rob, please. Thank you, Anita.
Okay, final question.
Promise?
Promise. 1.7, locally the Chief Constable is also introducing locally focused outcomes. Could you explain what that means?
Which section are you in?
Sorry, this is in
page 2.
The performance data, page 2, 1.7.
1.7, let me have a look. Okay, so, yours have page, we have this every time. Yours have page numbers on, I can work with it. Paul's going to...
It's basically because if it's in conjunction with 1.6, where it talks about nationally the Home Secretaries, you may have noticed after years of not setting national targets, the Home Secretary has decided they wish to set some targets at a national level. That's what Stephen was referring to in terms of success at a national level being determined by admissions to A&E rather than reports of knife crime to the public. That's what the Home Office are saying they will be judging success against in the future. So if you need to read 1.6 and 1.7 in conjunction, so the Chief Constable setting some local measures of success on top of how we're going to be judged nationally.
So does that mean, for example, knife crime, a decision on where the Commissioner feels it's realistic to take the numbers to?
Yes, we're developing between me and the Chief in terms of, as part of this year's budget setting, the additional money we're putting in to make sure as our performance data as you'll hopefully agree with me, is getting better in terms of what we can actually tell and communicate to the public, and also in terms of the analytics the force has got itself, both by areas, by police officers, and all that sort of stuff, allows us to do better performance management of it. You know, when you kind of look overall our crime per resident puts us kind of just below in terms of the kind of bottom half, and we need to measure that on the per residence of 1,000, partly because the growth in the county has tended to distort the totality of the numbers. If we're not careful, people are going, well, over the last 10 years is up by 20%. Well, we've grown by 20% as in terms of a population. So we are in the bottom half. I would still like to be in the lower bank in all crime, and there will be bits but you will have spikes in that, like I said, around particularly around drugs and kind of modern slavery, as we are more proactive. And I think you've probably heard me say, Northamptonshire Police is on a journey. It's now starting to make you know, the right outcomes for the public. We've made the necessary investment. When I actually think, you know, when I started, the forces budget was 111 million. This coming year it'll be 26.7 million pounds more. The public need to see on behalf of them better outcomes. You know, Mr. Chairman said there, we want to see better judicial outcomes. We want to see less crime occurring. And you know, if you like, we've given the force, the chief's given his staff what they need. We now need to see those performance numbers improving. And of course, that's not easy, if you like, if it's set against other forces trying to do the same. But, you know, no offence, well-paid individuals, let's make sure that we hold them to account on behalf of the public.
Absolutely. And I think it would be helpful then when that's sufficiently developed if those outcomes could be reported as well as part of this continual, as you quite rightly say, improvement in the performance monitoring and reporting, both for ourselves and for the wider public.
More than happy to. I do want to be careful, as we've talked about today. Sometimes taken out of context. And you know, we have a robust conversation, but sometimes it'd be very easy for someone to just take these statistics and kind of go, oh my Lord, drugs has shot through the roof. Well, yes, because actually they've been fantastically proactive. So I need to continue to find a way that I can share it with you, but also in a responsible way that doesn't denigrate the good work that the force is doing.
That
was a yes. That wasn't my trying to say no in some clever way.
No.
But you know what? You get what I mean, though. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. And that was actually 2 questions, to be fair, after he promised me 1. So that one.
For you to manage it, Mr. Chairman, that's not my fault.
That 1.7, locally focused outcomes, does that include locally focused RJ outcomes? Is that what it's talking about with regard to? Because that 1.7, I wasn't quite sure when Paul intervened with that. Rob talks about the Chief introducing locally focused outcomes on all types of crimes and residents to tell us what's most important ones for them, such as burglary. Was the outcomes things like RJ? Is that what he was talking about?
No, let's be clear. The Chief Constable is responsible for Northamptonshire Police. In my management of the performance of the force and the Chief Constable, it's about he needs to be responsible for what he can deal with. In terms of, it doesn't mean that we don't work very closely together to make sure that we get better outcomes. You know, we've reintroduced a local criminal justice board where some time ago it had become regionalised, and it become very clear that that was not serving Northamptonshire. And I commend the, if I might use that, the bravery of those people to come and sit round the table from both the judiciary, from the CPS, from HMCTS, to make sure that we collectively kind of work together. So it's very difficult for other people to kind of give themselves targets. I think the bit I would say from the Chief's point of view, Northamptonshire Police is in a better place to hold partners to account on the basis it's now doing a better job. You know, I went and looked at, with the criminal justice people, that was, you know, some of the quality of some of the information that was provided was not at the standard that you were going to get the necessarily prosecution. But of course the problem is it's a journey. Digitisation in many respects is a really good thing. But in the past you needed to have, you know, when you had a case file, they prepared all of this information and they handed it over. So they probably checked it. With digitisation, as stuff has come in, they've kind of shared it in bits, which is why kind of digital evidence management makes it to be better that we can actually now provide files, get feedback, get advice from criminal justice on and get their advice accordingly. But in the end, if you like, from my point of view, Chief's got to set his targets and his outcomes for his force. I need to like a holistic, view to make sure that society in Northamptonshire is getting safer. Now, some of that, I'm afraid, I don't have direct power, for instance, over the judiciary. And I'll give you an example. My predecessor tried to give to get better outcomes in court, to give them more sitting times. I think he offered them £1 million to actually say, I'll pay for you to sit in court. The judiciary said, oh, you can't have it because I can't take it off of you because you've got police in front of your title and they feel compromised. No, I'm the police and crime commissioner. So some of those things that we do are done through a mixture of kind of coercion, persuasion, friendliness. There's not direct. I think it's going to be interesting because some of you may or may not have noticed the police and fire minister, is no longer the police and fire minister. He is now the police and criminal justice minister, and the fire minister is a standalone. So actually, hopefully, and when we met the other day, there's some work that we're talking about where we're bringing together both police and criminal justice. Because in the end, at its simplest, it's about outcomes for residents. It's not about some arbitrary target.
Okay, so a long answer to a really, it was just a simple question. Does local focused outcomes include non-custodial RJ outcomes, or it was just understanding the terminology. That's all I wanted.
Yes, is the answer.
Okay, so it's locally focused outcomes. They could be informal RJ type things, including the more formal.
Yeah, Paul's probably got a good
example. So I suppose. I think it's not necessarily about that sentence perhaps needed to be reworded, because actually what it's about is local targets.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's justice outcomes.
That's all right. That's all I wanted, because I thought that sounded like sort of the... Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So feedback taken on that. All right. Just great debate on this, and important to have a good debate on this. Just 2 points for me, Commissioner. Number one is I cannot believe that we are still losing or identifying missed crimes, that there is still a question mark over the CDI inspections with regard to the integrity of reporting crime. When the public report a crime into the police, they expect them to record it, all right, on a system that works, and that we don't have situations whereby we are either under-reporting the reality of crime, and it's quite important to the public to have that confidence. Are you confident that this has been going on for decades, though, but why haven't we really grasped this and have a system which is simple and has integrity and reports crime accurately?
I'm glad you've asked me that one. How long have you got? Thank you. Yeah, that's what my colleague just said as well, actually. We both had that whisper in here. We better tell a lot. No, it's important to know that at this moment in time, Northamptonshire Police is having its CDI inspection as we speak. So for everyone, that's where HMIC kind of come in. So I get assurance. Let me be clear. When you ring up and you report a crime, it is recorded. What is going on is, if, for instance, you and I are, just bear with me on this one, you or I are in a relationship and you ring up and say that I've assaulted you, and then what happened is you then go and, by the way, he did this and this in the past. They tend to be historic, contributory to one. Now, there is a real serious question. So they will ring up and they would deal with the incident that you said. It's not like someone said, oh, we aren't bothering to record that. It actually tends to be historic contributory, like it says, well, actually, he's beaten me up, but by the way, he raped me, or by a thing. It's those ones, and their recording of that. And actually, sometimes they might, this is where it gets complicated, that inflates the number, but also that the key piece for me is it's not about some arbitrary recording crime number. It needs to be what you want to see as justice. You're ringing up and saying, well, actually, you beat me up in that particular instance. You might not be interested in those. You might use that to support that. You just want a positive outcome for that. So I think there is a proper debate that needs to be had in policing with the Home Office about what that means.
But those previously, they are all crimes that have occurred. So they all deserve their own crime number. And that is a really simple concept. You can train people that the criteria is that if somebody reports a primary crime, if there are ancillary crimes related, they are all separate crimes. So why are we not just training our staff to do that? So we haven't got to have these in-depth inspections, and we can get crime figures right first time.
How long were you a police officer, Richard?
Okay. But we need to do better, Commissioner.
Yeah, and to be fair, we haven't had our CDI inspection yet. The one thing I would say, Northamptonshire Police is in a slightly better place, as you know, we have an outstanding individual who's been working with HMIC to do them in other places. I'm not expecting a good or outstanding. I'm probably I think everyone must do better. Yeah. But it's kind of a low bar, isn't it? But it's like ours will be, must do better, but not as well as some others, if that makes sense. But you're right. There have been some astronomical numbers that have been, some forces have had a 60% increase in crime as a consequence of these historic natures, if you like. But I think the bit I want to reassure the public on, there aren't crimes occurring now that people are not getting justice for. Getting those and proving those historic ones is not easy. So in the child sexual exploitation one there, you've got people now who are reporting crimes that were committed when they were children, but they are no longer children. By the very nature, it's great, and in some respects, we're still in that post-Savile piece where people are coming forward and disclosing, and the Weinstein thing just shows examples of people are being believed when some of these heinous crimes have been committed in the past. But you can imagine it's not until quite recently that people felt that they would be believed. And of course, you've also got the flip side of that with Enrique's, where some people have been believed that shouldn't be. So that it's the two sides of the same coin. But I can assure you that there's not some crime that's occurring today that Northamptonshire is not going on to record.
That's it. And I think the end of this is the perception, isn't it? And we should have protocols, working practices and policies that now accurately record crime, and we just got to keep working on that. And you keep pressuring the police to ensure they get that right. And one final one is, I see that burglary and burglaries are down, which is fantastic. That is quite an impactful crime on the victims. So where's all the acquisitive crime gone? I cannot believe that all of our burglars have suddenly decided that they're going to live good lives. So have we seen acquisitive crime, theft increase in other areas, or do we see there's a general less amount of dishonesty in the county? I'm just running where the displacement is, because invariably in crime there is.
Yeah, you're ruining my bit. There's kind of two parts to that. One, as part of the contract with the public last year, around the council tax increase that you supported me on, one of the commitments that we made to the public was that they would get if you had your household burgled, and I don't make light of it because sometimes the gnomes are very important, rather than the gnome being nicked from your garden, you would get a visit. And at the moment we're on 99.6% of those people that have one get a visit. So actually we're making sure that if there are opportunities to follow up, gain evidence, those are taking advantage. As a consequence of that, one of the key things that the Chief wanted to make sure did, and ironically he did receive resistance from his own force for, is I want a proactive burglary team. And actually they, quite frankly, go around and make sure that if you are, if you've come out of prison and you have to be at home on a curfew, they're going to come and knock on your door. if actually they're going to wander around, they might follow them round. They're making lives of known burglars hell. And as a consequence of that, you'll probably see there's been a series and string of them. As Paul said, a significant chunk of them are currently enjoying Her Majesty's pleasure. And actually the key is when they come out is they will still be investigating them. They may go straight back. So actually, we want to make sure that we make life very, very difficult for them. And part of that as well, we've also funded burglary prevention. We've been working to make sure they're secure, and I do hope to come with some positive announcemements. The team's been working on you'll have heard of the Safer Streets Fund. So particularly on some of the back alleys of Wellingborough, we're going to be running some projects to actually harden some of those areas. But I don't want to rob some of my news, because someone will tell me off for giving all the good news away. But we put some money in ourselves, and we're currently trying to extract some more money from government to do that.
So, sorry, that again, a brilliant answer to not quite the question I asked. And because
apologies, Mr. Chairman, I'm doing my best.
It is. Has there been a displacement of acquisitive crime as burglary has dropped down, and it's, without a doubt, it's been absolutely brilliant with regard to locking up and putting pressure on people that invade other people's homes. But has there been a displacement? Because obviously we haven't got the theft figures. So I'm just wondering.
In answer to your question, no, there hasn't been a movement of them, and it's like the Safer Streets Fund. The part of the reason we're doing that is by target hardening. We know there's evidence to prove it doesn't displace it. We don't just want to move it around. It genuinely has got to reduce it.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, members, for that debate. That was really good. We spent an hour on that, but I think it's important that this is what affects our communities, and thank you for your questioning. Okay, and your next report, Commissioner.
I think actually, just to finish that one off, the even more exciting part of it, so obviously a key component of that, and don't feel rushed in the same way that it did. One of the things that was always important to me is we can't enforce our way to a safer community. So one of the key components was these fantastic women in terms of our ACE caseworkers. I will now hand over to Nikki for us to tell us a little bit about the great work they've been doing.
Okay, I'll try and keep my introduction brief so that we can get on to the slightly more interesting bit. As most members of the panel will be aware from previous reports, we were looking to put in place an early intervention support team. The team has been taking referrals since February 2019 and currently comprises 8 support officers. Since October 2019, 3 of those 8 have actually been dedicated to work alongside the police serve team. So they particularly take cases that are related to gangs and associated behaviour. And are actually one of the most effective elements within the SERVE team for engaging young people and families in the SERVE programme. We have found that actually very much sending someone in a police uniform out to speak to a family about engaging with the programme has had less success than if we send one of the support workers. So again, working in partnership in that way has proved very, very effective. In terms of the number of cases that have been supported, the generic ACE part of the team have supported 410 families, comprising 761 children, and the SERVE part of the team have actually worked with 354 children. Separately from the generic support. So in total so far, the team have supported 764 families and worked with 1,115 young people. So it is actually showing some really positive outcomes. The majority of their referrals, 46% of referrals actually come through police PPNs. And the majority of other referrals, 23% come from the multi-agency safeguarding hub and 25% come from schools. And schools have actually been very, very positive about referring into the programme. We also receive referrals through the NCC Early Help Coordination function, where they are too low to hit the thresholds for services that are provided by the County Council. So overall, the range of issues that are supported are domestic abuse, mental health of either the parent or the young person, substance misuse, parenting issues, challenging behaviour, school exclusions, knife crime, and exploitation and risk of gang involvement. I'm not going to go on any longer than that.
Okay, just one question on that. That's activity, not really outcomes. So is it what are the outcomes? Are we seeing a reduction in youth crime? Is it too early? Are we seeing a reduction in how are you measuring success rather than just busyness?
I'm predominantly going to allow Kelly and Lucy more specifically to talk about it, because actually in terms of how we look at the outcomes, in terms of individual outcomes, we use the outcome star suite to determine, we set outcomes for individuals in the sense of what they are seeking to achieve from the involvement. In some cases where they perhaps are maybe going through the SERVE programme, we're able to monitor whether or not they then move on to any form of criminal offending, where the issue that they are being referred for is related to exclusion from school. We're able to measure whether or not we get them back into school, whether they go into some other form of provision. The measures are not generic. The measures are much more related to the cases because they are specific to the outcomes that the individual needs to achieve. I understand that, but certainly when public money is being spent, what they want is that either exclusions are coming down, truancy is dropping, youth offending is dropping. Surely, at the beginning of the project, we must have been saying these are our KPIs, not just anecdotal pieces of evidence. We didn't set the KPIs specifically at the beginning because we didn't know the sorts of issues that we're going to... This has actually been set up deliberately as an evolving service so that we're able to be responsive to what presents. We are in the process jointly with the SERVE team of working with Tom in our office who's focusing on performance, about actually looking across the ACE team work and the SERVE programme work to determine some common performance indicators that we will be able to demonstrate across the two programmes of work in much more detail about outcomes like the ones you're referring to. At this point in time, it is more related to cases.
Okay. Is Lucy and Kelly...
Can I just add something to that? Look, I think the important point is this was deliberately set up on a 3-year project for us to actually make sure that we kind of evaluate it. The challenge, if you like, is proving a negative at its core, but we have a series of measures, happy to share them in the thing. But I think actually, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if we could let them talk about some of the things, I think you'll hear the power of some of the effects that they're having.
It is. Okay, so Lucy, do you want to kick off? Go on, off you go, mate.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm one of the early intervention ACE support officers that works alongside the SERVE team and have been doing that now for the past 12 months, well, on and off 12 months. So we work with young people that are involved in county lines, that are carrying weapons, that are drug dealing, and those that are vulnerable to it. So we see the indicator signs and referrals come from absolutely anywhere. We get them from education, we get parents referring their children in because they don't know what to do with them. We do have referrals from hospitals, so when there has been an incident, they will automatically refer into us so that we can look at it. And my role specifically is to look at the referral, see what their education is like, so exactly that. Are they in mainstream education? Are they attending school regularly? Are there broader issues that we need to explore within that family network? I will speak to the parent, get their view on things, see how they're managing, and then I will always go out and meet the young person and talk to them one-to-one on their own to identify what is concerning them. Because what happens is when I go out and speak with them on their own, they're more likely to open up and tell me a little bit more about what's going on rather than their teacher, rather than their parents. And we've found that approach has been so effective. We've got brilliant engagement from families because we're coming in saying, look, we're here to help you. What we also try and do, which can be problematic because of the volume of referrals we get through, is try and see that young person within 48 hours of the referral hitting our systems, because that's when the families are going, something is going wrong, and we're more likely to get them engaged. If we leave it 3 weeks, the crisis has dropped down, and they're kind of like, no, we don't want your support anymore. So part of that as well, we desperately try to get out. As soon as something's happened, we will go out and see them. Part of the stuff that I do, like one example of a case that I worked with, which is around school exclusions and reducing those, we had a referral come through from one of the schools in Northampton for a 14-year-old boy who apparently had threatened another student with a knife in class. They called us immediately and said, look, we don't know what to do about this. This boy has caused no problems. His attendance is absolutely fantastic. We've had no issues with him before. And they said, we just don't understand what's going on for him. They said, we don't want to exclude him, but clearly if he's threatened another student, we have to put a safety plan, we have to risk assess all the other students in our academy to make sure that they're safe. That day, I went out and met with the boy, met with mum, met them at home, had a really long chat with this young man, and he'd been really struggling with mental health. He'd been seeing a private counsellor through mum. Mum had paid for that because she couldn't get through the child and adolescent mental health part of the process. He'd actually been starting to self-harm using a knife because that was helping him cope with the feelings and things that he was having. And when I spoke to the young man, he said he'd taken a steak knife out of his mum's kitchen drawer and put it in his bag so that he could self-harm if he felt that things were getting too much. And he adamantly denied that he'd threatened any student with this knife. So we went back to school and said, you know, the other young person that's alleged that this boy threatened, I said, can we please go out and have a word with her and have a chat with mum and just see what's going on? Because at this point, parents of the other young lady were going to the chair of governors. They were, you know, clearly because they thought their daughter had been threatened, very serious. We went out and sat with family in their living room. We spoke to the young lady, we spoke to the parent, we spoke about the consequences of bringing a knife into school and how frightening that must have been for her. As it transpired, and as we spoke to the young lady, she said she'd seen the knife, but she hadn't been threatened by it, and that she'd kind of elaborated. Going back to school, they had got concerns about this young lady because she did like to fabricate and build things a bit more out of proportion than sometimes they were. So what we did, parents for the young lady were calmed down. We put a risk plan in school. So this young man would be bag searched discreetly every morning when he went into school just to make sure that he'd not got anything on him. He had a single point of contact in school that he could go to, so for pastoral support, that was put in place as well. We referred him to our prevention and diversion scheme, so run through the YOS to do a knife intervention and a package of support around him. And we managed to keep him in that mainstream school. And going back to the school, who I work with very, very regularly, they have had no further issues with this young man.
Lucy, what
Yeah.
we'll do, because that's great testimony, can we take a couple of questions about that, and then we'll go on to Kelly. So
Yeah.
can I first have Ian first and then Anita?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I mean, this is great work that you're doing. You know, it's really good. I'm really pleased that you're doing this. Is there a common theme that runs through the issues that you find with these children? Is it down to drugs, or is it down to anything to do with violence or anything like that? Is there a common theme that runs through more than the others?
The third part of it, because we are specifically looking at that cohort of young people that are on the periphery of gangs, we do get a lot of young people running drugs and drug dealing. We do have young people that are carrying weapons, and Steve said for lots of different reasons. We have to remember that these young people are victims themselves, and often, you know, they might be carrying a weapon because somebody has told them that they've got to do it, and they're incredibly frightened. You know, they are very, very vulnerable young people in our society, and not always will I say that they're coming from backgrounds where, you know, they live in poverty or their parents are not at work. You know, we have referrals into works where these young people are cash rich, but they're not getting the emotional support at home because parents are working, you know, 70 hours a week. And we have to look at the push and pull factors to why these young people are going down that route and working with the family as a whole, because, you know, we've got to prevent it from escalating, and we can't do that when these young people are going home to an environment that's not supporting them. But at the same time, as they develop into young adulthood, we need to give them the tools and the knowledge and the education around how these actions now are impacting their future. And we want them in school, we want them in jobs, and that's a big part of what we try and build as a package of support
So you
around
work with the
me, if a police officer had gone out and had that conversation, with all due respect, they would have got the same information because that's what we do. That's what we do when we engage families.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Anita.
Yes, Lucy. Obviously, you have spent a lot of time with that particular case that you just mentioned, and some kind of conclusion must have come. Do you have now like a strategic approach, standardizing the process for eliminating risk for the rest of your children? For instance, you say that this child had a mental issue. Would like a due diligence on all of the children to establish if the children have the same or potentially have the same problems, and what solution then that you could bring about by following the example that you have done. Because this can't be an isolated case. You will have a lot of situations like that, especially, like you say, if they have drugs, etc. So that is what I'm interested to know, if now that you have done this for about 12 months or so, there is a strategic approach to implement a system that will recognize the signal and then the approach that systematically you will take. Thank you.
I think it's kind of it's quite hard to kind of
Lucy, can you just, because then the camera can capture you.
You know you're on national television, don't you?
Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. Embarrass me now. I've gone red.
It is your good side, don't worry, crack on.
Good. Thanks. So I think it's quite difficult, and I think every case is quite individual when you go out and see them. So in that particular case, he wasn't known to be associating with other people that we were concerned about. There'd been no history around him. So for managing that within a school was quite simple, because it was like he's very low risk in terms of that happening again. We still need to put strategies in place to obviously safeguard. But what we try and do more broadly is lots of work with schools, so that we do assemblies and we go out and we talk to young people in groups around the dangers of carrying knives, you know, and the consequences of that kind of stuff. So we try and do a broader preventative to catch as many young people as we can before they're even on our radar. Then we get the ones that come in that are just starting to get into trouble, and we assess that and we put the right support at the right time for them, because we don't want to criminalise them. We want them to understand the consequences of their actions. And then we get the ones that, you know, unfortunately are far more involved, usually because they've been groomed into it by somebody older, and some of the approaches that we have to take are more, you know, excessive in terms of we ask them to wear a buddy tracker so that we know where they are. You know, we're putting a lot more, like, I guess, cautionary support around them, because they are still going and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. We like to catch them earlier, so we don't end up at that point. So there's a lot of education, a lot of work with schools. We do group works with young people that are particularly at risk. So if school identifies a cohort of, say, 6 or 7 young people that they're concerned about, we'll go in and talk to those 6 or 7 young people. And, you know, that might be once, it might be twice. And we always get led by, you know, the referring agency around if things have de-escalated, how effective things have been. And we have been getting positive feedback, you know, from that. But like Nikki said, it's quite hard at the moment to quantify it, because...
Well, actually, coming back to what the chair was saying, I think you have got the number for your key performance indicator. You have got the feedback from your clients, if I may say so, and then you also know the outcome. So it may not be a financial outcome, but you certainly can quantify the outcome if it has been negative or positive, and that should be part of your key performance indicator, because you've got all of the answers, you've got all the statistical information to actually provide to the commissioner. even that you have done just that 12 months, you know yourself how many numbers you have dealt with and how many positive action has been made. And what's more, if there is following up to those early intervention, then you can provide that.
Okay, right. We need to move on to Kelly because we do need to be good on time. So Kelly, tell us your story.
Okay,
and then we'll open you up to this incredibly hard scrutiny and questioning.
That's absolutely fine. So I'm Kelly, and I'm also one of the ACE officers, but I work specifically within the ACE early intervention team, alongside 4 other colleagues. So there's 5 of us that cover the county. I cover Daventry and South Northants. So a couple of cases, one of the cases that I want to talk to you about is a case who came through to me through PPN, through Public Protection Notice. And it was actually referred through for the local PCSO. And it was raising concerns around a 16-year-old female who was putting herself at risk of sexual exploitation, involved in drug and alcohol misuse. She wasn't attending college, relationship breakdowns with parents, and just generally putting herself in risky situations. So, by myself becoming involved, I was able to meet with a young person, meet with the mother, and get a bit of a background, do a bit of an assessment of what is actually going on for that family and for that young person. I was really fortunate that the young person took to working with me really quickly. So I was able to do some direct work with that young person, and we worked a lot around the risks of exploitation and, you know, the reasons why she's involving herself in these kind of situations, but also around what are healthy and unhealthy relationships. And from that, it led on to historical things that have happened to her in her childhood, growing up, and the reasons for her looking for that kind of attention. Within that, she was very easily led. She was involved in drugs. She was involved with alcohol. She openly talked about it, that she didn't want to do it anymore, but she just felt like everything was spiralling out of control, and she just needed somebody to come along and kind of ground her and pull things back together. So, speaking with mum as well, it had a massive impact on her emotional well-being, her mental health. It was just mother and daughter living in the family home. Father died when the young person was a baby, so there wasn't any significant male role model in the home either. So mum obviously needed support as well. So for me being involved, I was able to work with this young person for a period of time, and we worked around keeping herself safe, identifying what those push and pull factors were, identifying the triggers and how we can try and make things better for her. As a result of the work that I completed with this family, that young person no longer is putting herself in risky situations. She's engaging with drug and alcohol services and doing extremely well. She's returned to college. We managed to get her back into college, and she's also got a part-time job now. She's also part of the emergency service cadets, and she literally just dropped out of that. We've managed to get her back into cadets. She's doing really, really well, and she's thriving. One of the things I didn't mention was, as part of the referral that came in, she was going missing. And as a result of the work that we completed with her, there was no further reports of missing episodes and no further call-outs to the police. So we managed to reduce the demand on police interventions unnecessarily, but also we prevented that case from being escalated into statutory services.
That is a result.
Yeah.
That was one of my success stories.
Any questions? Look, thank you for your testimony. It really is, that's very powerful, and intuitively, I think we would all agree that this is the right thing to do. I think where the smartness comes in is trying to find what are the outcomes, because surely there are. Maybe it's just the decreasing of offending. Maybe it's them not becoming a victim. There has got to be that outcome that it's not just all the incredible activity, and that's not your problem really. That's more the strategic problem, because it is about public money being spent on these things. And the Commissioner's right. Listening to you, you know it's the right thing to do. It's now how do we develop that, support that, and ensure that it gets the funding long term. Nikki.
I'd just like to say I do support that. I think the biggest difficulty is that at the moment, I mean, we've invested as much as we can in this, but in terms of overall need in the county, the numbers are really small. What really needs to happen to demonstrate the outcomes that you're talking about in terms of actual reductions in demand on more specialist services is actually we need more investment in this, because the more of this we can do, the easier it will be to prove those performance outcomes that we're actually seeking to deliver.
So can I just finish on? It is chicken and egg, isn't it? You're absolutely right, but it needs to be it needs to be worked on. And some of us here will be going up for unitary if we've got skin in the game. You know, this is where community safety and this type of work links in. But you know what the unitaries are going to want is the evidence that it works. So it is about perhaps preparing the ground now. I'll go to the Commissioner and then to Rob.
I just want to reiterate that. And yeah, look, we go out of our way to, and you can imagine that poor Nikki is bored of the conversations we have about, you know, can we prove it and all those kind of things. But actually, it is, you know, you just need to hear. It's very easy when you kind of look at those numbers about 1,100 kids. Yeah, we can sit here and talk about statistics, but actually, I wanted you to hear about just a couple of lives that have kind of been turned around, and you know. Can we prove that one, you know, just the missing, you know, we have 10 missing people a day, 75 hours per missing person. You know, we still invest a minuscule amount of money in kind of early intervention in this county. You know, I spend well under £1 million, yet on behalf of you as the public, I spend £170 million keeping Northamptonshire safe. At some point, we need to get to a point, you know, often, if I a baseline budget for the force of 140 million, we ought to spend 50 million from stopping it happening and 90 million for force. We'll never get there overnight, and it's kind of, if you like, it's baby steps to kind of move it forward. But this is part of that bit of proving it. But I think the other thing is I deliberately chose, and I'll probably get flack for it, because when you look at the size of my office, well, they're included in it. So anyone, but I'm quite happy to have the debate if you don't think that that's kind of value for money. That actually it's a service that's directly managed by Nikki and Jackie, who sat quietly over there. Well done, Jackie, hiding away. To actually make sure that also that they can take their learning and we can evolve it. You know, we're not contracting it out. We're not making it so someone else is kind of making a profit in it, and we'll evaluate the thing. You know, they've only properly been running now over the kind of last 12 months. You know, I committed to run this for 3 years. We'd evaluate it very carefully as we're going along. But also they're learning each time, and we're kind of improving that. And in some respects, I'm not trying to make it sound like I was brave, but I think actually sometimes you just got to have faith. We all intuitively know it's the right thing to do. In the end, absolutely right. We need to be in a position to prove it. Because in reality, if I can get more money out of the public, I need to be brave and kind of go, do you know what? I don't need to put £600,000 into it. I need, you know, when the government gives me the £10 million extra that it owes me for Northamptonshire Police, you know, I want to spend half of it on really scaling that up, but I need to learn those lessons first. And because it's quite powerful. You know, when you, if I really wanted to get you, I'd have brought the kids along, and then you'd have been done. So,
yeah, I think that's emotional. I think that's emotional blackmail. But we'll move on. Rob.
On that lessons learned point, as a question for either of you, whichever you want to take it on. So on the non-success stories, what lessons do you think there are there, or what pleas would you have, not just for us, for the councils, for the wider system in the broadest sense of the word? What do you think the blockages are?
Oh, she's on. Look.
Oh, no.
There's no invitation there.
This is something that, you know, we discuss weekly in our team meetings, what the barriers are, what the challenges that we face. And a lot of the things that we're bringing up at the minute is delay in receiving our referrals. So we know there's need out there, but the referrals are being delayed coming into us, or they're sitting on someone's screen before they're allocated to us. And the idea is that we need to make a difference at that right time, at that earliest opportunity. And if we're not able to get in there early and do that work, then it's not going to be successful, because by the time it comes round, things have escalated, and it's most likely to be escalated into statutory services. So referrals...
Do we know why the delay? Why there's delays?
I think it's to do with capacity, it's to do with working with partner agencies, funding, but capacity. I mean, some of the things that we find at the moment for signposting to services is because of cost implications. There's services out there, but if we're referring families or schools to access services, they come at a cost. And we know that obviously that is a big thing for schools at the minute and their funding. So that sometimes potentially is a barrier for us to signpost to services, you know, and we're trying to sort of quick think on our feet, what is the best thing to do? But also inappropriate referrals. We get quite a lot of inappropriate referrals coming our way, so they don't meet our criteria. They're not the early stuff that we need. But also they're families that need an intervention. So, you know, the good thing about our service is that we can do that overall assessment, that holistic approach, find out really what is needed and signpost them to the right services. But we want those families at that earliest opportunity so that we can make a difference for them. So, yeah, inappropriate referrals and delay in receiving referrals, I think, is a barrier.
Lucy, is there anything you want to add on that?
From a serve perspective, because it is slightly different to Kelly's, I would say that, you know, what I'm experiencing is that these young people are not getting the support at the earliest opportunity, even with us involved. And I think that goes down to, you know, emotional literacy in schools, things like that. Young people don't identify that they have issues until it's in crisis point often. Same with parents, and I think, you know, if we had the power to catch these young people in primary school, you know, to put that real baseline, you know, this is a healthy relationship, this is how we feel, this is normal, this is not. You know, so many of the young people that I work with think it's perfectly normal for their partners to hit them. You know, they think it's perfectly normal to carry a weapon, because that's just what the world is like. And I'm having to go back and go, but it isn't, and that's not how it should be. So these mindsets are developing very, very early on, and I think we need to... Yes, and you know, we're having to... Yeah, it absolutely is.
Sorry, can we just have Lucy finish? Wait, one minute, Anita, wait. No, Lucy was talking.
Yes, I know, but I just want to ask you something. You just said all those signals, do you share them with teachers, for instance?
Share what with teachers, sorry?
Well, you just said those signals, you know, that children have parents who hit them or something like that. All those signals you mentioned, do you share this information with teachers at school so that they would intervene, they could look at early signs and share this information with you?
Yeah, I mean, the big part of what we do is consensual, so we have to get those parents on board before we can share information. If a referral comes from school, they've got consent to share that information with us, so it's already there. But if we're getting sort of information coming through from other means, you know, we have to get those parents on side to work with those young people. And once we do that, we're always saying to them, you know, the more people that we can put around you, the more agencies that we can offer support from is going to be beneficial to you. So we are sharing that information, absolutely, so that these families get the support that they need. Yeah.
Okay, just a reminder, please, there is one chair here, and I dictate the pace, all right? So anyone pushing in, no, honestly, let me tell you, all right, this is tougher than the 30 years I had in the old bill, all right? So please just keep to the rules and nobody will get hurt. Ian.
Yeah, thank you,
If
Chair.
you dare.
I'm sitting down. Yeah, I think this is commendable, what you're doing. I think we should get that recorded. This is amazing work that's going on from police and crime supporters you've got here. But I think, you know, this is something that we have to work with and get brought into local government reform going forward, because the more we can do this, it's going to minimise the impact on services going forward, isn't it? And that is where there's a real issue. So I think, you know, we should look politically from our point of view to get this put into the local government reform development.
I just think you're right, Ian. And I was going to make a commitment to the Commissioner about, you know, if we do get elected and we have and we get position of leadership within the new unitaries. I know we've got one from the north here and one from the west, and we will take this up. We will pick this up, and we will try to ensure that we get that holistic funding and that movement going, because you're right, intuitively it's right, and of course it's right, because you're working on the risk factors associated with not only offending but also becoming victims. It's basic psychology, it's basic intervention, and we do have to try start proving it, that's going to be a big issue. Let's start getting that evidence. That is important when it comes down to spending public money, but I think you're onto something. You keep going, and then we'll join you if we do get in and power. Commissioner.
Thank you. What Ian said, really. One of the key pieces for us is actually the bit that kind of gets me up in the morning is what can we stop it happening? You know, any victim that we can stop being a victim, if you like, before it kind of happens. How do we make Northamptonshire that kind of wonderful place to live, to bring up our children, let them go about their lives and kind of fulfil their potential? Should be, I think, something that probably most of us got into public life to do. But actually we can only do that by kind of working together. And one of my challenges, Nikki, is also to you, is it's kind of also for us to actually look at the system then and what lessons can we learn that we can take that forth and sort of say, right, well actually if we did that, because the problem is there's so much you can do sometimes, but actually the key for me about early intervention is if we can start with those kind of icons, we can let those kids grow into the wonderful kind of human, you know, and that doesn't just make it safer for me from a policing point of view. You know, there'll be better outcomes for their mental health. This will reduce the costs on the NHS. It'll have better educational outcomes. You'll have a better educated workforce that is going to be more productive and going to make more money in terms of things. So holistically, looking after that and getting it right early on is going to be the bit. And I just commend you to the opportunity that can we kind of work together to do it. On that basis, I'll run again.
Okay, Nikki, final comments, and then we really do need to move on. That's an hour and a half on just two issues, but two really good issues.
I was just going to say, in terms of value for money, as a really simple indicator, the average time that the ACE support workers spend working with the family is approximately 6 to 8 weeks. By the time case need escalates to the point where they're engaging with the County Council's targeted support team, the average length of intervention is 6 to 9 months.
Wow.
So just in terms of caseload, there is a clear financial evidence base that if you can invest in people to work with people earlier, you will be able to work with more people for less cost.
Yeah, that's good. Pickup's important, and it's also then outcomes. Listen, Lucy Kelly, thank you for your time. Now, you are quite welcome to stay, because we've got some fantastic items coming up. No, seriously, you're going to enjoy them. We're going to talk finance, and I'm sure you will stay. But no, thank you very much on behalf of the panel members. Thank you very much. I think a round of applause. Well done. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Okay, over to you, Commissioner. I think we're on.
I probably should just finish that. I would just. No one asked me about some of the good. I do.
Sorry, James. Do you have something first before we move on to?
Mine was for the end of the item, so...
Okay. I was just about to finish this item,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to encourage you to have a look at it. This was our first ever youth commission. I encourage you, as you go back to your communities, we are looking for new members for this year. They've done some fantastic work. You know, these young people, actually, the 20 of them, they engage with over 1,100 kids themselves, and directly we heard the voice from people. Mr. Shields might pass some comment, but it was quite an inspiring evening. I do believe the Chief Fire Officer said it was the best event he'd actually been to in a very, very kind of long time. It was quite powerful when it's very easy when we talk about knife crime and all the challenges of kids. It was really powerful to kind of go, do you know what? Our future's actually in quite good hands if we've got kids like that around. I would also encourage some of you to go onto eBay. You'll notice that the Northamptonshire Police is now on eBay. We're flogging off stuff that we've kind of acquired or removed from some of those criminals. So I'm making sure that I can generate some more cash so that we can give it away next year to good causes in our community. And everyone loves it when you take the money off of, or things off of criminals and flog it for a good cause, don't we all? I would highlight, and I'm just going to highlight, and I'll lead myself nicely into the estates piece around the new post for sharing between the police and fire. It is worth kind of saying Northamptonshire Police had a post at that level, but it had shared it with another county. And I think we'd found, particularly in Leicestershire, so actually by bringing these resources home to Northamptonshire, doesn't cost us any more money, but actually allows our police and fire to work better, which would lead, if the chairman, because I wouldn't want to overstep the mark today, would lead us nicely into the estate strategy.
Okay, members, any quick questions? But they've got to be quick. No, should we move on? Thank you very much. James.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just in terms of outcomes from that agenda item. So there was a request earlier in the discussion for future delivery updates to include performance against the locally focused targets to be developed by the Chief Constable, and then to summarise the conclusion from the discussion of early intervention ACEs, seemed to be the panel supporting the approach being taken, that it should be developed further in Northamptonshire following local government reorganisation, whilst also recognising that there needed to be a means of demonstrating the outcomes achieved from the activity. Is that a fair?
Yeah, can we add in the word partnership being really important for the success and expansion of this? It's got to be partnership involvement. Chair, Commissioner.
And just on that, I make a commitment to you that we, as part of our evaluation, an update on that, we'll add that, continue to incorporate into our delivery update, as would I will share with you when I've agreed with the Chief Constable how we're holding to account as part of his kind of performance update. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, is that enough, James? Yeah. Okay, item 7, please, the joint estate strategy.
Okay. Mr Chairman, the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's estate strategy, this report, can't even say it today, provides an update on my revised estate strategy for police and fire and rescue for Northamptonshire. It represents, and I particularly want to thank Paul for all his fantastic work on it. In the short time he's been working on it, probably made more progress than a lot of people had over a very long period. So particularly want to say thank you, Paul. He's still got dark hair, which amazes me considering what he's been through. It represents the first joint estate strategy since the PFCC became the Fire and Rescue Authority. Seems like a lifetime ago. It was only last year, wasn't it? And sets out my determination to have a joint estate strategy that would enable the emergency services to operate in the most effective way possible. As you know, both the police and fire and rescue estate have suffered from decades of underinvestment, which means buildings now require additional investment and maintenance to make them fit for purpose. This strategy seeks to correct this through a long-term approach to invest in existing sites where they require it, or provide new accommodation which will deliver better opportunities to enable service delivery. As part of the long-term strategy, we're also looking to developing our existing hub model, which the consolidation, sounds good this, non-geographic based functions from both police and fire into our current 3 hubs, along with a possible 4th, which is currently worked on by my office in conjunction with colleagues in both police and fire. The provision of this hub model will bring the corporate and enabling functions of the police and fire physically together, and therefore underpin the future to greater integration between the services. It's important to understand that the intention of this new strategy is not to close any station and leave no provision in a location, although some may be consolidated from 2 buildings into 1. For example, moving police into existing fire stations. In the long term, we remain committed to Wootton Hall, and options for bringing together the control rooms for both of the organisation will be examined. It is our ambition to collate our control rooms in Northamptonshire at Wootton Hall in the near future. Mr. Chairman, this strategy sets out the foundation for an exciting future for our emergency services, and I'm more than happy to take questions.
Thank you. Just a request from members. Let's condense our questions to questions, not so much preamble. I noticed that earlier on. We do a lot of preamble. I do as well. So questions then, please, and over to you. I'm the worst. Thank you, Ken.
After reading the short report, when can we have some meat on the bones?
The important part is a strategy. I think you notice we make some reference to some commercially sensitive stuff that's going on as we speak. Timing of these things is never perfect. I'm not sure if we're at quite an important juncture, some of them. But of course, one of the key things for me is if there are any individuals that kind of need to be moved around, I don't want to unsettle anybody. I want to make sure that we consult and work with them possible, because actually on that basis, Northamptonshire Police had the particular challenge in their case around Wootton Hall. That was quite unsettling for the organisation and took me quite some time to undo it. I have no desire to repeat the mistakes of the past, so I'd like to give you more, and there are good plans there, but it's important they're discussed and I hope improved as a consequence of those conversations with our workforce, because Northamptonshire Police, Northamptonshire Forest Guard between them, employ best part of 3,700 individuals. That's an awful lot of people, and quite a lot of this won't absolutely kind of affect, but our commitment needs to be that we create a working environment that they want to work. I think I've replaced the roof in the Chief Constable's office twice in the short time I've been here. We did some decorating in the control room recently. The roof has already leaked. As you'll notice in there, I make particular reference to one site. The site's not even worth £1 million, but to actually fix the roof is going to cost me £1.5 million. So actually, there's some sensible bits that have got to be done. But of course, mentioning stuff arbitrarily could actually be unsettling for people. I want to minimise that as much as possible.
But when do you actually see that there will be a plan with regards to this is staying, that's moving, that's consolidating? Is there going to be one plan that comes up and says, in 6 months or 9 months' time, this is what we're going to do?
Quick answer is yes. That plan is already in draft form, and as Stephen said, it needs to be consulted on both with internal staff, but also actually with the public, because whilst there is no statutory duty to consult the public on disposals, clearly we'd want to involve the public in something that impacts on them, however small that may be. So you may notice there's potential for somebody to be and some of you to be involved in elections in a little under 2 months, which in this case gets in the way a little bit of doing that consultation when we'd like to do it. We'll do it either immediately after said election, or if those elections are postponed, it gives us options to do it sooner.
Or if, in fact, the Commissioner is still there.
Absolutely. I don't take for granted. There was me, as Richard sort of said at the beginning, there's an election. This might be my last one. So we shall see.
And mine, I might add.
Yeah. Okay. Rob.
First of all, just to clarify on what you said about, did I get this right, that there'll be no locations abandoned? There might be cases where they're merged together, but there'll be no moving forces away from a particular location, is that right?
Absolutely.
Going back to some things you've said in the past around, for example, the fire stations, and with hindsight, you would never deliberately put it there. It's more historical. Therefore, are we being radical enough in this to future-proof?
I think by combining the police and fire, so we have 22 fire stations, and perhaps a really good example of one is, we won't be abandoning Kettering. We probably will move Kettering Fire Station at some point over the next 10 years, because quite frankly, it's next to a school. I think you've heard me talk about it. We have to, and I think there's also mosque or a prayer place nearby as well. And as a consequence, at 3 o'clock every day, the fire engine has to depart, because should there be a fire, it can't get out because of kids picking up at school. The problem in all of this is, which is quite important, and I hope to bring forth to you, one of the purchases we're in the middle of making, is when I came to this office, the kind of strategic plan for estates I'd got had broadly going to cost me £100 million plus. This, in terms of total outlay, including the new training facility that is nearly complete, will all be done for under £20 million. And that's not, that's not in 1 year, by the way, that's in terms of things. So there's a careful bit in terms of sequencing and disposal, but, one of the things I want to make sure to do, we've made serious commitments in terms of extra police officers. In conjunction with the new money from the government, we'll have more police officers in Northamptonshire than ever before. I don't want to do anything that kind of puts that at risk, but that means absolutely there is no plans to pull out of anyone's. And the reason that that's relatively easy to make is the demand profile and the risk profile for the fire service means if you look in Darren's report, I just refer you to Exhibit B, you will notice that it shows you all of the different locations we've got. So that extra reach, if that makes sense, probably provides additional facilities for the police service, but the key bit is hubs. Police shouldn't be in buildings, they should be out in communities. And actually, the chief's implemented some stuff to actually monitor how much police officers are out. These locations, in terms of engines, stuff like that, are deliberately based on where, in terms of our communities. Is there something around a consolidation of Desborough and Rothwell, for instance, are very close to one another? Is the opportunity to stick one in between the two? I'd absolutely love to. Can I afford to do it in the short term? No. So I suppose the key bit to you is, I'm comfortable in terms of radical, but also at the same time, I'm here and I'm elected by 750,000 people, and I'm here to keep them happy as well. So,
so a restrained radicality, I guess.
I hope you're going to come there and defend me when I'm being lambasted for being too radical, because if you know what I mean.
I shall pop in, see mid of the room, and then pop out again.
I'm not sure Paul feels that I'm being unradical, are you, Paul? I was going
and on the radical point, and your point about officers needing to be out there rather than the station. Interesting, there's a brief mention of drop-in locations. There's a potential for police to, I don't know if this happens in Northamptonshire, it's happened elsewhere, to police to be using desk facilities in private organisations, for example. So with regards to that desk capacity, what sort of thinking's going on there? How radical have you been?
So you may or may not realise, so one of the things is, so particularly if I use our front desks, so we partner in Kettering, we partner in Northampton, Corby, so in other words they're in not in South Northamptonshire yet, but I've got plans for South Northampton, but we want to make sure wherever possible that people can kind of come and visit, and in terms of local. But there is a piece around where they work. We've now been enabling them to be mobile for some time. Something like 2 years ago since we gave them all decent devices that they can do most of their stuff on their mobile. It seems like a lifetime ago. It was 2018 we launched Pronto. They could do something like 15 things. They can do 26 things now today that they don't need to kind of go back for. We probably haven't explored going into private businesses, but they can use them pretty much anywhere they would want. So, for instance, one of the sponsored PCSOs in kind of the south of county, they use the parish council office. There are lots of really varied ways in terms of whilst I convert the fire station in Corby to be both police and fire. We use some offices in the top of kind of Corby Cube until we do that. So they're geographically well located. Yeah.
That should potentially then lead to a reduced desk demand in your own premises, and therefore.
Yeah, I think the other thing that one of the ones of the fourth hub that we're kind of talking about there actually has, if we did it on the basis that every single person is always there, we need X amount of space. So actually some innovation in terms of modern working practices and dynamic movement of desk is also being looked at as part of it. At its core, I want to create locations that serve the public, but also we've asked our people to work in buildings, they're not even substandard. We want them catching criminals, we want them keeping people safe. And some of the things I've found in fire stations, I've got a good example. One of my budgetary hits later on is actually I've got, is it 113,000 scarred on our piece, which is, I've got to remove asbestos from fire stations that has been there for 8 years, or it was identified 8 years ago and should have been removed by then. We should be creating, in terms of, we want to be the employers of choice, where great places to work, and that doesn't mean swish. Sometimes nice and a good place to work that's warm and dry and your roof doesn't fall down, but also is modern in its kind of thing. But does that mean everyone kind of gets a desk? No, it doesn't. We'll be dynamic in terms of how we deliver on some of that.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Commissioner. I think that the estates strategy, the estates genre of policing and fire has been really tackled very well. I note where we were when you took over, and that's no reflection on previous administrations, but you and your team have really gripped this up, and I think that the public are grateful for that, because it gives us a strategy going forward, and as you said, all the right signals and ticking all the right boxes in how we want policing and fire to be delivered in the future. So thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll...
Through you, Chair, any conclusions, comments from the panel as a whole on this? Beyond the default is to note the update.
Yeah, I think Ken was right about it'd be nice to eventually have the more detailed plan, but as an overall arching strategy, yeah, we note that. Would that be fair? Yeah. Sorry, Ken. I don't know why I keep calling you Ian at the moment. You two got to separate. Is that enough? Yeah, okay, then. Okay, item 9 then. It's the... yes, I know. I'm just checking. Well done, Anita. Just checking to see whether because you're my new deputy. Okay, well done. Nice shot. Item 8. Over to you, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, my work is to ensure Northamptonshire Police and Fire and Rescue receive a fair funding settlement and received a much needed boost when we arranged for the county's MPs to meet with me, the Chief Constable and Chief Fire Officer, to learn more about our work and the pressures put on the emergency services through the growth of the county. It was a very positive and constructive meeting, and I hope will help get central government to recognise the inherent inequities with our current funding formula in Northamptonshire. But despite the pressures on our budgets, we have been able to invest more in our frontline services, and today's report sets out in front of you at a high level the forecast financial outturn for the period the 1st of April to the 31st of December 2019, together with a financial update. The forecast outturn is based on 3 months of estimated data and is therefore subject to change. I've got to put my disclaimers in. Haven't I, Helen? This is, of course, will be updated and refined to reflect our latest information as the year progresses. The total policing budget of £137.314 million is forecasted to be £1 million underspent, which compares with the 573 underspend identified in October. The OPCC office and delivery budgets and enabling service are forecast to underspend by £750,000. We continue to monitor spending and to ensure that strict budgetary controls are maintained, and the report in front of you provides a great deal of detail, and we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. And Ken, got it right there.
What do you mainly contribute the underspend to?
Question.
A lot of it, as the Commissioner has highlighted, has actually arisen from the OPFCC office. And as we've pointed out, I think when we met in January and we did the finance report in January, a lot of that relates to the timing of staffing in the youth team. Sorry, Nikki. Sorry, Nikki. That's £450,000 of the underspend on its own. So it is about timing of those posts and timing of the recruitment on the complaints posts, because the legislation took such a long time to come in. Also, as the year has gone on, the force have also started to identify an underspend as well. At the very beginning of the year, you know, they were very, very prudent and were assuming a little bit of an overspend there. But as the months tick by, they've highlighted a small underspend as well.
I commend you with regards to the underspend, but has it actually had any material effect on the services that you're actually been able to provide?
I can ask from the force, they would say no, because their element is small. It's 144,000 of the overall overspend. Underspend, gosh, underspend.
I was going to say, you wouldn't have been
Thank you.
about an overspend.
No. In terms of the underspend from the PCC side, I'm looking at Nikki here. I do suppose it means that it's taken a little bit longer to get up and mobilised in the youth work team. But if I could ask you to.
Yeah, I mean, basically the issue we had with the youth work team was, although we had the job description ready to go out to advert in March, putting that out to advert coincided with the introduction of a new back office HR system, which resulted in significant backlogs in even being able to get the posts advertised. So whilst we had intended to have people in post by June, in reality we've had a staggered introduction with a couple of posts coming in online in September, and some of them are still due to start, because as well as the delays in terms of recruitment, we also obviously have the inherent issue around vetting and the delay that puts in place once we've successfully identified someone for post.
But I think I'll just add to that also, in addition to that, we hired from the cohort that we got the quality that we wanted. Nikki had been very clear that we needed a high caliber individuals, and so actually when we were comfortable that we would go out. It was better to get the right person than it was just to kind of fill some posts and then kind of try and sort the mess out. Yeah, that's how in the past many an organisation gets itself in trouble.
Okay, well done. Good, thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's a good report. And now the same thing but for fire.
Mr. Chairman, the challenge of rebuilding the finances of the Fire and Rescue Service are highlighted by today's budget report. As the report sets out, the Fire and Rescue budget monitoring has been subject to significant volatility, can't even say it, let alone manage it, across a number of budget areas month on month during the year. The volatility mainly affects staffing, corporate, ICT, engineering, property and training budgets, and these have been impacted significantly on the forecast outturn as the year has progressed. The Chief Finance Officer and finance colleagues will continue to work closely to better understand the cause of this. At this stage of the year, there is a forecast underspend of £80,000 for the Fire and Rescue budget, as compared to 427 in October. An early work on the January monitoring has identified that the forecast is likely to underspend further as the year progresses, or ends is probably the right word there. Last month I explained that the Fire and Rescue budget was tight with a number of uncertainties and pressures. However, I'm confident that we have the right measures in place and a robust approach to ensure our Fire and Rescue Service has the resources and equipment it needs to efficiently undertake its duties. Once again, Helen and I are happy to take any questions you might have, and I would take like to take this opportunity to thank Helen particularly and her finance colleagues for the work that they've done in getting to this point, and Paul as a councillor as well.
Thank you, Chair. I just add to that, you know, your hard work does not go unnoticed, Helen, you and your team. So we're very grateful for that and the support you give to the Commissioner, his office, and the people of Northamptonshire. Rob.
Some questions around appliances. So I understand then from 2.6.4 on page 48 for the panel members. So you've been buying the appliances that have come to the end of their lease term, and if I understand correctly, then the cost of that flows through engineering services and stores. Is that correct?
They're not. I'll let Helen say they're not the appliances. They're actually other vehicles.
Yeah, they're small car vehicles,
Okay.
those ones. So they all have a value of under £6,000
Right.
individually at the end of their lease. Previously, they would have got to the end of their lease and they would have looked at buying new vehicles. However, they've got extremely low mileage on them, and they've got many more years of life left in them, in the view of the vehicle fleet manager. So the fire service have bought them out of their lease at the end.
So in the statement of requirements that's gone out for the purchase of new appliances, so the finance costs of that, will that flow through this same budget line?
No, the finance costs of those, they will be purchased from capital. Tenders are very expensive items, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of items, so they will flow through the capital budget, and the revenue costs of financing that capital budget will be met from the revenue budget, and they'll be separately in a separate line as capital financing costs. The reason there are no capital financing costs in this year's budget is because there was no capital programme for the fire service until this year, when the Commissioner agreed one with them.
So when we inherited the fire service, they came over with no reserves, I mean, thankfully no debt, old appliances and all that kind of stuff. So that's I commend both the work of the team in putting that together, but also the diligence of everybody that's been employed by the Fire and Rescue Service. I suppose the comfort of knowing that any underspend now gets contained within the Fire and Rescue Service has helped us to do that. This was always a 3-year programme. I think we're fractionally in front, but only kind of fractionally in front. We have managed to thrash out finally a capital programme that sees 8 appliances purchased over the next 2 years, and that then flows through in terms of the capital requirement. But it was quite tight to make that all work, to make sure that we invested those into additional kind of firefighters, but actually we're looking very carefully under any penny, because of course that then means that our maintenance costs should come down, so it has an impact in there, because when you're trying to maintain kind of old vehicles and kind of keep them on the road longer, bits of equipment in terms of breakdown. So it was important that and it's not about symbolism, but it's quite important for people that have been working hard for many years. I think it's 10 years that their budget's gone down kind of every year. Meant that also they needed to see something in terms of the kind of fruition of that. So it kind of flows through in terms of capital cost, but in that is also a high reach tender that we're trying to get, and there was a number of water tenders, I think. So it starts to put us back on the path to having a sustainable long-term plan for Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Service.
So if there's no line for the revenue element of finance costs in the existing fleet at the moment, does that mean the existing fleet's all paid off?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Understand.
There are still a few leased items, but yes, all the owned items have had their revenue contributions
Historically,
paid.
they were largely funded from capital grants that dried up about 5 or 6 years ago from government. So they were bought outright at the time then, which is why we've inherited vehicles that are end of and coming to end of life.
And you'll notice because obviously this is budget monitoring, when we're looking at next year's in the budget, all of these lines are taken care of to make sure there's that whoever sits in this chair after an election doesn't have this problem in the future, that actually there's a replacement programme that's there, there's a capital programme, and let's not kid one another. Chief Fire Officer, myself, Helen would love to have spent more money on the capital programme and replaced the fleet quicker. And of course, any extra money we manage to whether extract or latitude we're given in terms of precept might allow us to look at those things. I'm content that the risk is managed and the money is managed at this moment in time. But actually, there's some good sound finance there, if you like, for the longer term.
Sorry, Anita. Ken, do you need to? Yeah, Anita first, then Ken. Anita, go first.
Hello. Okay, I have two questions to ask you that are both related. This is to do with a statement of account update, 2018-19, and assurance and control. Now, page 51, if you've got... it is paragraph 5, 2018/19, statement of account update. Okay, the audit that was performed by Ernst & Young made some various recommendations, of which they say that the importance of continuing to prioritize the step set out in a revenue budget and medium-term financial planning, and also by the discipline by contributing to general and earmark reserve. Now, on the assurance and control, they have made some specific comment about review by the Joint Internal Audit Committee, and they stated that the recommendation was to identify, to ensure that senior manager, budget holder, and managers are adhering to them. My previous experience in my accounting practice at various local authorities have, I saw the difficulty for manager to adhering to these. And my question to you is, how do we intend to monitor this? Because the difficulties will be not so much with senior manager, but budget holder and managers are the key question. Thank you.
You've picked up a very good challenge there, Mrs. Shields. It has been quite a challenging year in managing that relationship with the budget holders within the service. They've been used to working in different ways, with different values, with different processes and different procedures. We have a member of our team, the finance technician, meets with every single budget manager every single month, and they review the actual spend to date, their future plans and their forecasts. I think it's fair to say there are different levels of experience of those budget managers. In terms of some of them are very experienced budget managers. They know they've got good grip on their costs and a good understanding of what they need and their estimates. There are other budget managers who are either new to it or have been working in a particular way, and that is a little bit more challenging. And some of the budgets that we're seeing volatility on are those particular areas. We've done a number of training sessions and briefing sessions to management meetings this year. We've reviewed the policies and procedures. We will be doing more training to the budget managers next year, making sure that the Chief Fire Officer is kept up to date on the budgets that we feel have got a grip or those that we feel that they need to develop and improve on. And it's just working very closely with them. It's continual engagement with them, continual working with them to help them get better at their forecasting, to help them get a better understanding of how to manage their budgets. It's a long journey.
Talking about workshops and training and so forth, do you or have you made a procedure manual to enable those specific staff to understand what they should be doing, in specifically for instance, for transferring funds from one account to another?
Yes, we have a corporate governance framework which we issued in January 2019. we did sessions at the senior officers management group. We did training sessions at the middle managers officers group, a couple of those sessions. We've also had an internal audit of that area as well, and we've currently got a follow-up internal audit of that. The internal audit goes through the audit committee, and that showed that, yes, we have good policies, we have good procedures. They're not always all being followed, and that's our big challenge, is to get the budget holders following those procedures. So, as I say, it's a long road, but we're keeping at it.
And I think I'll just add to that. I think, you know, look, there used to be a department in a extremely much larger kind of organisation. You know, we've, no, can't tell you that yet. We're in a conversation with Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary in a meeting there, they kind of had, you know, yes, they feel the extra scrutiny. And there is that transition from department to organisation which they're undergoing. I think whilst there are concerns, it's worth just remembering now, it'll be very tight. We'll be fractionally over or fractionally under. We don't quite know which way yet, but credit to all, you know, and sometimes it's very easy to have a pop at me politically. Oh, you have members of staff in your department. Well, that's what Dean has done a great deal of work to work with them to make sure that we've achieved this particular point, and it didn't happen by accident. I'm not saying she did it by herself. And like I say, there are kind of good and bad that probably the good and bad practices that some people have got. But when I look at the totality of where we are, you know, because we are 1 year and about 2 months on from a change of governance in what was quite a really dire sort of situation, I think I'm quite content. I wouldn't go as far as say I'm happy, but I'm content with the situation we find ourselves in, because you make also the reference there that, you know, the level of reserves and uncertain landscape satisfied the short term, put in place the appropriate arrangements and made significant strides to build financial stability. You know, and I say that against the context of when I took that decision to actually go forward in terms of this governance change wasn't an easy one. I had a lot of advice to say, you're not going to be able to make this work. So it's testimony to all the people that we showed faith in making that decision, and the dedication they've gone to rise to the challenge to make it work. Does it mean we're there yet? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But I think I still feel I'm in a slightly better position than probably I expected to be, but I'm not in a position where I'd be, I'm not ready to be happy yet, am I, Helen? No.
Commissioner, Kate, both of you, on the following page, the financial support, it stated that the return of the Chair Assistant Chief Officer for resource to the substantive role in Leicestershire. His function terminates at the end of February. Does it mean that, because you mentioned here the 3 organizations to review the in-house financial support activity, and that will be then provided by one team in a police. So could you expand a little bit?
I would just like to commend Helen for her work over the year, because actually, as you noticed there, and thankfully you robbed me of my ability to make that point earlier, is, you know, when, so I mentioned here, we shared, if you like, a head of resources with Leicestershire, and whilst we took the time to do it, poor Helen took on additional responsibility around the Section 151 for the most part of the year, at the same time as we took over governance of the fire service. So, you know, her team underneath her worked really, really well. So I commend Helen for that. I sit here and you do your best to make us all look good, and I thank you all for that. So.
I can only tell you some because we're currently under consultation with the finance team at the moment. But financial support, there are 3 Section 151 roles. For a short time, as Stephen said, I carried the 3, so the Chief Constable, Fire and the PFCC. The Chief Constable, a member of his team, has going to be doing that now, which is absolutely great. I'll be retaining for the moment the PFCC and the fire one. Well, we have our 3-year period of stability for fire. In terms of the rest of the support to fire and policing, policing have their own finance team. It's very small, it's cut very, very fine, and when they moved into shared arrangements some years ago, even more was taken out of it, so there's not many pairs of hands in there to do what they do. In terms of fire, we have a couple of members of staff in our team, in the PFCC, and the rest of the services are purchased from local government shared services. And we get a really good mix, but it means that there's not a great lot of resilience in any of those teams. So in line with what we're trying to work towards, which is to bring some of those support areas for fire and policing together, we are restructuring the areas in our team and the force finance team to look at bringing more capacity, resilience and expertise in there. And over time, that will also include looking at the services that they buy in from others as well.
Okay, let's go to Ken now, and then, sir.
Very quickly, just probably semantics on 2.6.4, which my colleague actually brought it up earlier. I actually earmarked it as well. Could I suggest, and you know, with your agreement, is when it comes down to actually stating the purchase of could we say non-operational leased vehicles, because it does give the indication that you know, perhaps operational vehicles that have reached their sell-by date, we're buying them.
I think that's a very good bit of feedback. Thank you. I'll take that on board.
Operational vehicles.
Yes, you know
I think what you're really looking for is in other words fire engines and non-fire engines. I think is what you're looking for.
I think Helen, I think you were right to commend him on his suggestion, rather than the Commissioner trying to bury him with it. Brilliant. Okay. In jest. Okay.
What about wet and dry?
Are we talking shavers or something else?
Yeah, good cop, bad cop. Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just one quick one. On 2.66 on property, the second bullet point, how are your discussions with MCC going?
Ongoing.
We can probably say no more than that.
Okay.
You little stirrer, you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, members. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I make kind of one final point, which I think is kind of relevant. I don't want to get lost in kind of the debate here. I just want to take this opportunity to provide some kind of assurance. Over recent years, both for a police and fire perspective, both sets of enabling services have been under pressure and found a different way to deliver it, some with LGSS, some in conjunction with Leicestershire. I remain committed to, and our business plan, Mine for Fire, didn't show some slash and burn as some others had about significant savings, because actually I don't think they're there to take. Because actually, whilst you have fantastic, brave firefighters and police officers, without being rude, if no one bought their kit, paid their bills, ensured their HR needs were met, to be honest, they wouldn't be very effective. So very much for us, the bringing together of the enabling services is a key component and allows us to find a way to invest in that area. So I kind of want to reassure, because some people, when they sort of say you're bringing those things together, people sometimes get concerned that there's some sort of great saving that we're looking to make. I would probably say the investment in it will not grow at the same rate as the front line, but we will be investing in them to make sure, you know, and that's in some respects by having two emergency services with fire, HR, ICT, bringing them together, and also making sure that we secure those jobs in Northamptonshire. You know, I remember when I ran for election last time, there was some big debate about whether our control room would be in Northamptonshire. Unequivocally, my commitment is to bring jobs back to Northamptonshire from outsourced things where possible, and also to make sure that we consolidate our control rooms inside Northamptonshire, because that better serves the public. That's not some, fortress Northampton. I just think it makes good business for our people. We're a growing county, and we need to make we lay those foundations. My ambition has always been to make sure that, subsequently someone looks back in the future of whatever colour that holds this post that goes, darn, they took some difficult decisions and they laid the foundations for the future. And I hope people can kind of see. Now, I don't do that alone, and I commend the wonderful team of people that I actually work with. Might be the last chance I get to thank them publicly. Well, we shall see. So, thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think that completes that business on your side. We've got our own business. But can we also just thank the men and women of both services? We do the governance side, the strategic side, the scrutiny, the oversight, but there are men and women out there 24 hours a day putting their lives at risk to keep us safe. So I hope that if any of them are listening, they realise that we're doing this for them. We appreciate what they do and we're grateful for their service. Okay, right. Okay.
Could I just mention just a very quick scenario, is that I think I mentioned at the last meeting, and perhaps because I pass it on a regular basis, is in Milton Keynes they've got their blue light hub, which in fact perhaps it's the idea of the Commissioner to actually go a stage further and involve a third service into his philosophy. But I don't know, there may be some ideas that possibly could be picked up from there. There must be spending an enormous amount of money. Whether it's big enough, I don't know, because it looks a bit small to me, but that's from a personal perspective. But I'm sure there must be some ideas or something perhaps we could pick up as a county, with regards to their experiences.
Our head of estates has been speaking with Thames Valley's head of estates.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Okay, right.
If there's a good idea out there, happily ripped.
Yeah, it'll be the only legal theft that goes on that department. Nick all the good ideas. James, over to you, sir. Item 10.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the standard item on the work programme, normally to enable the panel to review what it's previously said it would do, to add, amend and take out of that as appropriate to ensure its resources are always directed at the most effective outcomes. Clearly, at this point in the year, we're just about at the end, so any consideration of the panel's work programme will be looking forward as much as it is looking at the current. The panel that takes its place at the start of 2021 in July, subject to agreement of 2 agenda items forward from here, will need to set and own its own work programme, but it's always beneficial for that to be informed by what's gone before and any suggestions from this year's panel to next year's panel. So there's an opportunity here for the panel to talk, as far as it wishes to do so at this stage, about its current work programme and any items, potential topics for future scrutiny that it wishes to highlight for its successor. I hope the report is fairly clear and self-explanatory, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Rob.
Suggestion. Why don't we move to a rolling 12-month plan? I appreciate we can't bind the next panel, but it's only indicative anyway. Would that not be more meaningful?
I think there's something of an intention to do that, insofar as clearly at the end of the programme of meetings on page 56, you've got various potential items of business that haven't been slotted in.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm just thinking like what we did in July and October, etc. It's not really telling us very much. Why not just integrate that into a rolling plan? And if anything, anything drops off, then we move it forward, etc., so we don't lose anything.
Yeah, certainly. But don't think there's a particular issue with that, with the principle of that. And yeah, certainly. You can have a situation, for example, when the panel scrutinised the Commissioner's proposed appointments of two senior officers to share the statutory responsibilities of Chief Executive, the panel agreed that it wanted to look at how that arrangement was operating 12 months into the future. So that would certainly be an example where something would go on to a work programme for longer than the current municipal year.
Okay.
So,
Okay, are we happy with that? Is that for noting, is it?
well, it's,
Just another quick one. How often are we expecting performance updates in the fire service as opposed to the police? Have we agreed on that?
What? Sorry?
Performance
Performance updates.
updates from fire.
Yes, yes.
I don't know, did we agree on that? I'm not sure.
No, as you can imagine, so I review performance with the fire service on a regular basis every month. I'm quite happy, given the nature of theirs, us to probably provide a highlight probably every 6 months, I would say, on theirs to hear. To be honest, what we'll do is, why don't we'll incorporate something into our report from an indicative point of view, because the main bits is obviously pump availability and actually kind of response times, which, to be fair, it's kind of rolling, so I suppose I can just drop that into the monthly as I think about it, really.
Good. I suppose the only thing, I don't know, panel, what you think about is that when we get post the coronavirus crisis, whether to have, if there was significant police involvement, if it did escalate, to have a look at reviewing that with regard to a public's perspective on that policing. I don't know how first of all members would feel, and whether Commissioner that would be appropriate to be holding you account, depending what measures coming through from government with regard to any types of restrictions on civil liberties that may occur. Do you think that's worth it to pencil it in there?
Mr. Chairman, it is your agenda. Like I said, I provided the update earlier to give you some insight into how they're preparing. We would look at those things, but not straight away. This is not going to be over in five minutes. Let's be quite clear. It could very easily take some time to find its kind of way, understand all of the implications. I only use as my own example. We're talking about shutting of schools, actually, and my worry would be you shutting of schools and then you said those kids home to grandparents. Well, they're the most at risk. So, I would only urge caution. I'm more than happy to provide, if you ask me to provide a report, how have I assured myself on behalf of the public that I think there's just probably some language with the, and I don't mean disrespectfully, it's not for the panel to hold the force to account. You need to hold, how have I held the force to account to answer some of those questions.
I think you're right.
But I'm not averse to you, if you're going to go, look, these are some things we would, Commissioner, have you considered these in terms of part of your questions? I'm not sucking up to you. There's some good wisdom around this table, and actually, I'm happy to take it.
And it really was about reflecting the public's view and maybe concerns or appreciation of the policing of a crisis. That is actually at your doorstep. We wouldn't be on the police, but we'll be talking to you. Sorry, James, did you want to add to that?
And of course, Mr. Former Police Officer, the service of the fire service.
Absolutely.
Well, yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's worth highlighting that the work programme isn't a one-shot deal. You don't need to think, well, if we don't include something on topic X today, then that's it. We've missed our chance. That's why that's why we report the work programme to each meeting. Yeah. It should be
organic.
It should be organic. It should be fluid. You should be.
Yeah.
I would say you'd be doing wrong if you took the view, well, we agreed our work programme at the start of the year, that's it, this really important issue has arisen, we should do something about it, but we can't because we can't slot it in. No, you should be responding, changing priorities, taking things out, putting things in to reflect what you think is necessary to carry out your role most effectively.
Yes, and wise counsel. Thank you. Sorry, Commissioner.
Mr Chairman, one of the things that I had before I came here this morning, I had a visit from a new gentleman at the Home Office. Actually, very good for Northamptonshire. He's the lead for digital. He's a former councillor also in Northamptonshire from a few years ago from South Northants. So I deliberately wanted to get him in and, if you like, Northamptonshire eyes him some more. And I was given we had a presentation given to him on our Pronto system, which is our kind of mobile thing. I would ask that you would include in yours, and I was so impressed with it, I thought, do you know what, the panel I think would like to see that. You know, bearing in mind this is something that was only implemented in 2018. It actually shows you firsthand what a police officer, with the utmost respect to you, Richard, what you probably did on your pocketbook and an archaic computer.
Nothing wrong with a pocketbook.
It now does, and the digital version of it. So if I may, I would ask respectfully that you might be very interested to see a demonstration of what they're doing on a mobile, and we'll, if you like, perhaps in terms of steps to up the panel's knowledge and some of the stuff that's going on and where some of the money goes and what it means.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a cop in to do that, and nice to meet some of those.
He is like you. He is a former cop. He has been with the. He did tell me 40-something years and retired 10 years ago. So don't want to give you any ideas. You know.
Is, through you, Chair, is that a demonstration of the Pronto system, or do I misunderstand it?
Okay, brilliant. Okay, good. Happy to move on? Thank you. Happy with that, James?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Okay, item 11, James, recruitment of independent co-opted members.
Thank you, Chair. This essentially is a procedural matter. The sitting independent co-opted members, although recruited at different times, were both appointed to serve a term that runs out on the 30th of April. 30th of April of this year. That creates the need to go out to recruitment, potentially for a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 3 panel independent members to serve for another 4-year term. The procedural background to that is set out at the bottom of page 57 and the top of page 58 of the papers, and you'll note that sitting members are perfectly entitled to seek reappointment. So the remainder of the report sets out the process for doing that, which we've used successfully in the past. The panel, it is open to the panel to give any views on that they wish to do so, but practically what the panel was being asked for today is to agree to appoint a selection subgroup to participate in that recruitment process, particularly at the interview stage. Given the limited attendance at the panel meeting today, there will be scope to finalise that by email afterwards, but essentially I'm looking for the panel's agreement to set up a selection subgroup of 3 panel members to participate in the recruitment exercise, with the 3 panel members to be confirmed following the meeting if the panel feels that's
I'm quite happy to volunteer. You two gentlemen, Ian and Ken? Yes. They have you 3. So we have to interview these 2. Because after today's performance, all right, one of them with his charming smile and just basically one dominating me, you know.
Yeah, yes, Chairman. It would be important that you invited you went out to the public. You invited interest,
and then we do the same.
All of the there's usually a shortlisting process. All of the shortlisted candidates were subject to the same interview.
Well, certainly we would encourage you to stand, sir. Did you want to say something, Rob?
Yeah, I was just actually, I think you've answered it there. First of all, then we reapply as if we've just seen the advert on the paper, just the normal mechanics. Yes, of the application process. Second thing, I just want to ask about the idea of all the independent members at terms ending at exactly the same time. I can see some benefits from the recruitment process perspective, but I can see some limitations to that, as opposed to just having four-year term from when, and, you know, the rolling off at different times, especially in, you know, the Commissioner has to put up with us for quite a while, building up our knowledge, and then a lot of new people coming along with no knowledge again.
Through you, Chair, I take the point that you're potentially creating a situation in which you lose all of your built-up knowledge at the same time, whereas if the appointments were staggered, that wouldn't be the case. I think part of the thinking in having the 4-year term, and it's probably worth highlighting that although the panel has now been in existence for best part of eight years, this is only the second cycle of full cycle of independent co-opted member appointments that we've been through. So, although it's a long year, a long time in calendar terms, we haven't done this too many times before. But having said that, I think part of the thinking was probably if you stagger 4-year terms, then you're potentially setting up a commitment over a longer than 4-year period, aren't you? So you're and I think part of the thinking was probably, if I'm honest, I'm working from a county council perspective where all our councillors go out to election at the same time, whereas the esteemed representative of Daventry District Council may highlight the potential of doing thirds.
Look on the bright side, if I don't win the election, you're going to know a hell of a lot more than the new commissioner, and you can have a hell of a time.
No, it was set as a 4-year term to reflect the period each commissioner is appointed for, and it was done all at the same time. Again, on that basis, and probably it's for neatness as well, speaking as a local government officer.
Okay, yes.
So very quickly, what happens is in the situation if either myself or my colleague are not elected at the next election?
We'll just have to get another volunteer, or me, all of us. So we'll that's obviously if we are.
Well, we'll still be borough.
Yes.
Oh yeah, we're still. Yeah, no,
Yes, sorry, yes, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
Good shout. No, Ian brought that up. I'll take reflective glory off that one, but that was a good shout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite correct.
Of course we are.
The existing councils retain responsibility for the police and crime panel as they have done. There's the potential, of course, always that each of the existing councils may decide to choose to change their representatives to the panel, which they could do on an annual basis. I think very happy to have the expressions of interest from panel members here today. I think, Chairman, I'd like to canvass or send out an email to other panel members to at least see if there is any further interest. I also need to finalise the exact timetable for the recruitment. That part of taking that into account will be how the timing for the recruitment relates to the appointment of councillor panel members for 2020-21. If we're in a situation where all of the recruitment and the selection is done before annual meetings in May, June, then it will be the existing panel members, because you are the representatives of your local authorities until they appoint someone different. So there's some working out still to be done, to some details to be filled into the plan, which will relate to the points raised.
You know, if you remove any three of us, we'll be immensely hurt.
I was just going to say, from the independence perspective, actually, you don't have that much time, really, do you? 30th of April, but if you're going to advertise it externally,
He's going to be busy.
Oh yeah, and it's not as if there's anything else happening in Northamptonshire at the moment either. I think conscious that this won't be that this can't be and won't be allowed to drift. I think possibly the saving grace is that all things being equal, and the panel is not due to meet between now and July. It would be a different matter if we were trying to do the recruitment, you know, in the midway through a normal year in the middle of a programme of panel meetings.
Good. Okay. Commissioner.
Just offer when you've done your interviewing and you've got one in the same we did for Robert, if anyone kind of wants to experience, come spend some time in the control room, go out on patrol, coronavirus appropriate, allowing and appropriate, but also, as this might be my last one, you haven't always been an easy panel to work with, but I commend you for the way in which you've held me to account with a smile but steely questions, and particularly over the last 4 years, James. It's not easy managing this lot, and I thank you for your diligence and bringing it together. And I do hope I get to work with some of you again, but that's up for the people of Northamptonshire to decide. So I just want to say formally thank you.
So, through you, Chair, can I take it that the panel agrees the recommendation as set out in the report? It's yourself, Councillors Pritchard and Jelly have expressed an interest, and I will canvass as well.
Absolutely, totally agree. Okay, thank you. And the final item 12, proposed dates. Not a massive discussion. We'll stick them in our diary, and I think that's probably anyone. Don't want to put them in your diary? No, but it looks like. Do we need to do any more, other than just recommend? Is there more technical than that?
No, I hope the panel can agree the proposed meeting dates.
They are lovely dates. And Wednesday, the 3rd of February, is the day after my birthday, and I expect cake.
You will provide.
Me and my big mouth.
Well, through you, Chair, Tuesday, the 4th of February 2020 was the day of my birthday, so
all right.
think yourself lucky.
Okay, is that it, sir?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. A good meeting, and see you next term.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, sir. Great.